So welcome everyone. Thank you very, very much for coming together we can spend time together and we spend time together in the company of this great body of wisdom we call Torah. And it's there as our companion to help us learn to walk through this life, which is full of disappointments as well as joys, which is full of separations as much as it's as well as attachments, and it helps us walk through a life with a sense of the value that we get from each moment, and we help one another through Torah find a sense of mooring and attachment. So we're going to read this week a very powerful Torah portion, which actually addresses something about that, about the tension between having a sense of fixedness and a sense of mystery and impermanence, a sense of uh, predictability and unpredictability. So it's very interesting Torah portion, which is Parshat Shemini. If you'd like to go ahead, we can say our blessing, and then we will read through our Torah portion together. Baruch
Baruch atah
Adonai
Adonai,
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
melech
melech
haolam,
haolam,
asher
asher
kidshanu
kitshanu
b'mitzvotav
b'mitzvotav,
v'tzivanu
v'tivanu
la'asok
asok
b'divrei
b'divrei
Torah.
Torah. Amen.
Thank you, God, for this opportunity to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and most importantly, perhaps relationships of Torah. So we are in Parshat Shemini, which is a book of Leviticus, chapter 9. I'll share with you the opening verses, and I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. On the eighth day, Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. He said to Aaron, "Take a calf of the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering without blemish, and bring them before Adonai. And speak to the Israelites, saying, Take a he-goat for a sin offering, a calf and a lamb, yearlings without blemish for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for an offering of well-being to sacrifice before Adonai, and a meal offering with oil mixed in. For today Adonai will appear to you." They brought to the front of the tent of meeting the things that Moses had commanded, and the whole community came forward and stood before Adonai. Moses said, "This is what Adonai has commanded that you do, that the presence of Adonai may appear to you." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Come forward to the altar and sacrifice your sin offering and your burnt offering, making expiation for yourself and for the people, and sacrifice the people's offerings and make expiation for them, as Adonai had commanded." Richard, would you like to read it? Verse 8.
Yes, Rabbi, thank you. Aaron came forward to the altar and slaughtered his calf of sin offering. Aaron's sons brought the blood to him. He dipped his finger in the blood and put it on the horns of the altar, and he poured out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. The fat, the kidneys, and the protuberance of the liver from the sin offering he turned into smoke on the altar, as the Lord had commanded Moses. And the flesh and the skin were consumed in fire outside the camp. Then he slaughtered the burnt offering. Aaron's sons passed the blood to him, and he dashed it against all sides of the altar. They passed the burnt offerings to him in sections as well as the head, and he turned it into smoke on the altar. He washed him in sections as well as the head, and he turned it to smoke on the altar. He washed him the entrails and the legs, and turned them into smoke on the altar with the burnt offerings. Next, he brought forward the people's offering. He took the goat for the people's sin offering and slaughtered it and presented it as a sin offering like the previous one. He brought forward the burnt offering and sacrificed it according to the regulation. He then brought forward the meal offering, and taking a handful of it, he turned it into smoke on the altar, in addition to the burnt offering of the morning. He slaughtered the ox and the ram, the people's sacrifice of well-being. Aaron's sons passed the blood to him, which he dashed against every side of the altar, and the fat parts of the ox and the ram the broad tail, the covering fat, the kidneys, and the protuberance of the liver. They laid these fat parts over the breasts, and Aaron turned the fat parts into smoke on the altar and waved the breasts and the right thighs as a wave offering before the Lord, as Moses had commanded. Aaron lifted his hands toward the people and blessed them, and he stepped down after offering the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the offering of well-being. Moses and Aaron then went inside the tent of meeting. When they came out, they blessed the people, and the presence of the Lord appeared to all the people. Fire came forth from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat parts on the altar. And all the people saw and shouted and fell on their faces.
Thank you, Richard. And June, would you like to continue there at the start of chapter 10?
Thank you, Rabbi. Now Aaron's son, Nadab and Abihu, each took his fire pan, put fire in it, and laid incense on it. And they offered before the Lord alien fire, which he had not enjoined upon them. And fire came forth from the Lord and consumed them. Thus they died at the instance of the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, "This is what the Lord meant when he said, through those near to me, I show myself holy and gain glory before all the people." And Aaron was silent. Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron, and said to them, "Come forward and carry your kinsmen away from the front of the sanctuary to a place outside the camp." They came forward and carried them out of the camp by their tunics, as Moses had ordered. And Moses said to Aaron and to his sons Eleazar and Ithamar, "Do not bare your heads, do not rend your clothes, lest you die and anger strike the whole community. But your kinsmen, all the house of Israel, shall bewail the burning that the Lord has wrought. And so do not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die. For the Lord's anointing oil is upon you." And they did as Moses had bidden. And the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, "Drink no wine or other intoxicant, you or your sons, when you enter the tent of meeting, that you may not die. This is a law for all time throughout the ages. For you must distinguish between the sacred and the profane, and between the unclean and the clean. And you must teach the Israelites all the laws which the Lord has imparted to them through Moses."
Thank you so much. Mark Levinstein, would you like to continue there at verse 12?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. Moses spoke to Aaron and to his remaining sons, Eleazar and Ithamar. "Take the meal offering that is left over from the Lord's offerings by fire and eat it unleavened beside the altar, for it is most holy. You shall eat it in the sacred precinct, inasmuch as it is your due, and that of your children from the Lord's offerings by fire. For so I have been commanded. But the breast of the elevation offering and the thigh of gift offering you and your sons and daughters with you may eat in any clean place, for they have been assigned as due to you and your children from the Israelite sacrifice of well-being. Together with the fat of fire offering, they must present the thigh of gift offering and the breast of elevation offering, which are to be elevated as an elevation offering before the Lord, and which are to be your due and that of your children with you for all time, as the Lord has commanded." Then Moses inquired about the goat of sin offering, and it had already been burned. He was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, Aaron's remaining sons, and said, "Why do you not eat the sin offering in the sacred area? For it is most holy, and he has given it to you to remove the guilt of community and to make expiation for them before the Lord. Since its blood was not brought inside the sanctuary, you certainly should have eaten it in the sanctuary, as I commanded." And Aaron spoke to Moses, "See, this day they brought their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord, and such things have befallen me. Had I eaten sin offering today, would the Lord have approved? When Moses heard this, he approved.
Thank you. And Dave Lev?
Mhm. Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, "Speak to the Israelite people thus. These are the creatures that you may eat from among all the land animals. Any animal that has true hoofs with clefts through the hoofs and that chews the cud, each you may eat. The following, however, of those that either chew the cud or have true hooves, you shall not eat. The camel, although it chews the cud, it has no true hoofs. It is impure to you. The daemon, although it chews the cud, it has no true hoofs. It is impure for you. The hare, although it chews the cud, it has no true hoofs. It is impure to you. The swine, although it has true hoofs, with hoofs cleft through, it does not chew the cud. It is impure to you. You shall not eat their flesh or touch their carcasses. They are impure to you. There goes football. These you may eat of all that live in the water. Anything in the water, whether in the seas or in the streams that has fins and scales, these you may eat. But anything in the seas or in the streams that has no fins and scales, among all the swarming things of the water and among all the other living creatures that are in the water, they are an abomination for you, and an abomination for you they shall remain. You shall not eat of their flesh, and you shall abominate their carcasses. Everything in the water that has no fins and scales shall be an abomination for you.
Thank you, Dave. And Catherine, would you like to continue there at verse 13?
Thank you, Rabbi. The following you shall abominate among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination: the eagle, the vulture, and the black vulture, the kite, the falcons of every variety, all varieties of raven, the ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, hawks of every variety, the little owl, the cormorant, and the great owl, the white owl, the pelican and the bustard, the stork, herons of every variety, the hoopoe and the bat. All winged swarming things that walk on fours shall be an abomination for you. But these you may eat among all the winged swarming things that walk on fours. All that have above their feet jointed legs to leap with on the ground. Of these you may eat the following: locusts of every variety, all varieties of bald locust, crickets of every variety, and all varieties of grasshopper. But all other winged swarming things that have 4 legs shall be an abomination for you. And the following shall make you unclean: whoever touches their carcasses shall be unclean until evening, and whoever carries the carcasses of any of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. Every animal that has true hoofs but without clefts through the hoofs, or that does not chew the cud, they are unclean for you. Whoever touches them shall be unclean. Also, all animals that walk on paws among those that walk on fours are unclean for you. Whoever touches their carcasses shall be unclean until evening. And anyone who carries their carcasses shall wash his clothes and remain unclean until evening. They are unclean for you.
Thank you, Catherine. Jay, would you like to read a little bit, starting at verse 29?
Thank you, Rabbi. The following shall be impure for you from among the things that swarm on the earth: the mole, the mouse, and great lizards of every variety, the gecko, the land crocodile, the lizard, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. Those are for you, the impure among the swarming things. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be impure until evening. Anything on which one of them falls when dead shall be impure. be it any article of wood or a cloth or a skin or a sack, any such article that can be put to use shall be dipped in water and it shall remain impure until evening, then it shall be pure. And if any of those falls into an earthen vessel, everything inside it shall be impure, and the vessel itself you shall break. As to any food that may be eaten, it shall become impure if it came in contact with water. As to any liquid that may be drunk, it shall be impure if it was inside any vessel. Everything on which the carcass of any of them falls shall be impure. An oven or stove shall be smashed. They are impure, and impure they shall remain for you. However, a spring or cistern in which water is collected shall be pure, but whoever touches such a carcass in it shall be impure. If such a carcass falls upon seed grain that is to be sown, it is pure. But if water is put on the seed, and any part of a carcass falls upon it, it shall be impure for you.
Thank you, Jay. And Justin and Linda, would you like to read starting at verse 39?
Thank you, Rabbi.
If an animal that you normally eat dies, one who touches its carcass shall be unclean until evening. And one who eats of its carcass shall immerse his garments, and he shall be unclean until evening. And one who carries its carcass shall immerse his garments, and he shall be unclean until evening. And any creeping creature that creeps on the ground is an abomination, it shall not be eaten. Any creature that goes on its belly, and any creature that walks on 4 legs, to any creature that has many legs among all creeping creatures that creep on the ground, you shall not eat, for they are an abomination. You shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping creature that creeps, and you shall not defile yourselves with them, that you should become unclean through them. For I'm the Lord Hashem, and you shall sanctify yourselves and be holy, because Hashem is holy, and you shall not defile yourselves through any creeping creature that crawls upon the ground. Bear, do you want to read it?
Sure, this is the last line of this portion. To distinguish between the clean, the unclean, and the clean, and between the animal that may be eaten
Wait, Bear, I
and
think
the
you
animal
forgot
that
verse
may not be.
45. You have to start at
You
verse
have to read
45.
it 45?
Yeah.
Okay. For I am the Lord who has brought you up from the land of Egypt to be your God. Thus you shall be holy, because I'm holy. This is the law regarding animals, birds, all living creatures that move in water, and all creatures that creep on the ground, to distinguish between the unclean and the clean, and between the animal that may be eaten and the animal that may not be eaten.
Oh, thank you all so very much. Our entire Torah portion. I'd like to share with you a focused study about it. If you have a copy of the study sheet, I invite you to take it out. And so here we are. This is a very dramatic moment as I read it in this week's portion. Here's the setup. The setup is we've been reading for many, many chapters a description of how the Mishkan is to be constructed, what materials are to be used in building it. And then we've been witnessing to its being constructed and it's finally being erected. And now we're at the stage where it's finally going to be inaugurated and used for the first time. And it's to be used in a ritual that is designed to bring the Israelite people and God closer together. And so this is, in a sense, a ritual that's to reassure the Israelites that God is close with them. It is a ritual that is prescribed in great detail about how it's to be conducted, what kind of offerings are to be brought. And so this is designed to be a ritual structure that's to stand for all eternity, I would say, to provide a sense of predictability and reassurance that in a nomadic world, there are things that you can count on and a ritual that you can exercise and effect in order to bring some level of certainty within one's life. And yet, on the very first day that this Mishkan is used and this ritual is conducted, it is uh, it is shattered. That moment, that initial moment, is shattered by these two sons of Aaron, Nadav and Abihu, who apparently conduct some kind of ritual that was not prescribed. It seems to be something impetuous on their part. They seem to get caught up in the moment of watching their father and their uncle conducting this service that brings the presence of God into the presence of the community. And so they seem to rush forward with offerings of their own, and something catastrophic seems to happen. Uh, and so this is one of only two narratives that we see in the entire book of Leviticus. And so this is a narrative that seems on the surface to be a reinforcement of the whole Levitical project, which is to create clarity and boundaries and rules and protocols that need to be followed. The Levitical book is practically devoid of any kind of human drama, any kind of narrative. And so it's just this is one of two narrative moments, and it's one that seems to reinforce the basic lesson of Leviticus. So I want to kind of explore that a little bit and perhaps challenge it a little bit and see perhaps some of the complexity that might be there. So yes, so I've chosen for the initial verse uh, that moment of Nadav and Abihu. Number one, Nadav and Abihu offered strange fire before Adonai, and fire came forth from Adonai and consumed them. And then I'm sharing on the page verses from this week's Haftarah portion, which is from 2 Samuel. And the setting is this, is that the Philistines, under the leadership of King David, have finally been defeated. And now David wants to reclaim the ark, which had been captured by the Philistines, and bring it back into the Jewish community. And so he he reclaims the ark, and they start to bring it back within the community. So here are three separate incidents that happen as part of trying to reclaim the ark. They put the ark of God on a new cart and took it out of the house of Abinadab. While David and the rest of the Israelites were dancing before God to the sound of instruments of cedarwood, harps and lyres and tambourines, rattles and cymbals. But when they got to the threshing floor of Nachon, the oxen nearly upset the cart, and Uzzah reached out for it and seized hold of the ark of God. And the Eternal grew furious with Uzzah, and God struck him down on the spot. So David diverted the ark to the house of Obed Edom the Gittite. The ark of the Eternal remained at the house of Obed Edom for 3 months, and the Eternal blessed Obed Edom and all his family. So the rabbis chose this as our Haftarah portion because, as in this incident with Nadav and Abihu, there's something catastrophic that happens during this moment of trying to bring in this ritual object, the ark itself, back into the community. And three different characters are involved here: David, Uzzah, and Obed Edom. And King David engages in this wild display of dancing and there's music. And elsewhere in this Haftarah portion, his wife comes up to David. Michal says, well, you certainly put on this big spectacle of yourself, dancing like that in front of everyone. That was so disrespectful. Okay, so there's this scene of David, okay, of his abandonment and the passion and display of his wild dancing. Okay, then we have this moment where the ark see where the cart that is holding the ark seems to be in danger of tipping over, and Uzzah, it seems, puts his hand up to try and steady the ark from falling off the cart, and the result is struck down. And then the third character is Obed-Edom, who, because of that name, it's clear that he's not an Israelite. He's an Edomite. Okay, he's of a different tribe, and but yet that is where the ark is placed, and he takes care of the ark for 3 months, and it says that apparently he did such a good job that his household is blessed by God. And this character, Obed-Edom, is mentioned in the Talmud in the volume Brachot, and they say, "Oh, he did a really good job. What he did was he swept the area while it was in his home around it so that it stayed clean. He sprinkled water around where the ark was so that the dust wouldn't rise up and cover the ark." So we'll come back to like these both this Haftarah portion and Nadav and Abihu in just a moment. So the incident with Nadav and Abihu is obviously it turns out is provocative to the rabbis when they read it. They don't understand what happened. They don't understand uh, why Nadav and Abihu were subjected to this level of being consumed. They want to know what was on their minds when they did this. Why did they do it? Why were they punished this way? And so there's lots of different commentary about that. And there's a line of commentary that we're going to look at here in number 3 that is hinting that, uh, let's not let's not condemn them because what they did was out of an act of impulsive passion. So here's from an early midrash, number 3. Overwhelmed by joy on perceiving the new fire, they sought to redouble their love, whereupon they took each one his censer. So this early midrash is saying they were marveling at this wonderful thing, this wonderful event that their father and their uncle had facilitated, and they got caught up in the moment, and they wanted to add to this moment of great celebration, and so they brought their own offerings out of their senses. And then here's a more modern commentary on it. And this is from Moses Mendelssohn. Moses Mendelssohn was born in 1729, died about 1786, and he was German. His father was a rabbi, and he is someone who believed that one could be both religious and um, be invested in Western rationality and logic. And so he's considered to be one of the founders of the Jewish Enlightenment movement. And of course, he's related to his son, Felix Mendelssohn, great composer who eventually converts to Christianity. But he wrote what Moses Mendelssohn did was he translated the Bible into German, although it was written in Hebrew letters. And then he wrote in Hebrew a commentary on the Torah called the Biur, and that's where this commentary is from. Nadav and Abihu did not maliciously transgress the word of God, but in their superabundant joy, they lost judgment and entered the Holy of Holies to burn fire incense, although this had not been commanded. In their excessive love, they were eager to minister before God with new incense, in addition to the dedicatory offerings of the day. So again, Moses Mendelssohn says, they didn't mean to any kind of disrespect. They were just full of this passion, and they were full of this joy and love. And they wanted to bring something of their own in addition to the formal offering that their father had brought. And so in their text, it says, after this moment, it says, Aaron was silent. And here's this moment where this ritual, which was fixed and prescribed and clear and well defined, is somehow interrupted by Nadav and Abihu. It's fractured by Nadav and Abihu. And Aaron, in the face of this fracturing, is silent. So I thought of this bit of commentary by Walter Brueggemann, who's one of the, I think, great American Protestant interpreters of the Bible. And he wrote a piece called A Fissure Always Uncontained. And there are some ways in which Walter Brueggemann understands the Jewish text and sensibility and culture a lot better than many of us within the Jewish community. So it's a beautiful piece. Here's what he says. Jewish ways of reading yield fragments. The God in this tradition leaves traces. This is a text and a God and a people and a reading habit that gives their due to fissure. The rich textual witness to that dislocation we call exile is sufficient evidence that Israel did not know what to say any more than we do in our moment of fissure. Walter Brueggemann is, in a sense, what he's pointing out is there are some faith traditions that try to offer an explanation for everything. And he's hinting that Judaism understands there are some things that can't be explained, and sometimes when we try to do that, we are dishonoring the moment. We are trying to create a sense of predictability and, in a sense, control where there shouldn't be. That sometimes we need to embrace not being in control if we want to have a sense of wholeness in our lives. So I want to share with you the painting for this week. And this is a painting by Paul Klee. Paul Klee was a Swiss artist, and in the early 20th century, and he and many other artists and writers and philosophers were engaged in the process, if you will, of dismantling a structure that had existed for hundreds of years within Western society that had created a, a sense of what was true and what was proper. And the early 20th century became a process of that all falling apart. There were too many anomalies to allow that kind of a structure to continue to exist. So in the world of art, Klee was one of those who participated in the dismantling of the structure of what was an appropriate art subject, how should art be conveyed, and he is one of the early, if you will, surrealists and abstract artists. And for Klee, what was important was he's said this rather iconic statement. He says, art does not repeat the visible, it makes visible. So for him, what's critical in creating a painting is to begin, if you will, deconstructing forms that we are familiar with. He says, that's the only way to begin to reveal something beyond what we currently see. And for him, what the artist becomes in touch with is something that's pulsating, something that's generative, something combustive that transcends the constraints of current reality. So this notion of any great work of art has to be accompanied by a distortion of natural form. For him, he says, the final form that we see on a canvas is not the most important thing. The most important thing is for the artist to be in touch with the power of creation itself. And that orientation on his part leads him to say that what we see, whether it's on the canvas or in the world around us, is merely a current iteration of some powerful force in the universe. Uh, and that becomes a radical notion, because what that means is the way things are now is not necessarily the final iteration of that powerful force. So here we have a painting called Ad Marginem, which means at the margin. And the notion here is that this is the perspective of a fish at the bottom of a pond. And around the edges are these figures that are of insects and some birds and other creatures and some letters and numbers and and what Clay is acknowledging is that that's usually what we are most focused on, the stuff of everyday life, the stuff that we either need to consume, the need or the things that we need to protect ourselves from. And so we get caught up in what he calls the marginal aspects of life. But here the fish's focus is through the water and up and focusing on the sun. And the water is still. And so we have a sense that the fish, in a sense, is in a meditative state where everything is calm and still, and the stuff of everyday life that the ego is constantly dealing with has been pushed to the edges. Okay. And it may well be that at some point the fish and the insects and the birds and everything and the frogs may regain center frame, but the fish has seen and focused on the sun. And the fish will never unknow that experience. So here's this beautiful quote from an essay, or actually a lecture he gave on modern art. I'd like to share it with you. He says, the deeper the artist looks, the more readily he can extend his view from the present to the past, the more deeply he is impressed by the one essential image of creation itself as Genesis, rather than by the image of nature, the finished product. Then he permits himself the thought that the process of creation can today hardly be complete, and he sees the act of world creation stretching from the past to the future, Genesis eternal. So I brought this painting in because, in a sense, what Clay is talking about is seeing past the fixed forms that we're used to seeing. He's saying the final form is merely energy in transition. And what's important is to access that generative power of the universe. And to do that, he and other artists engaged in this act of distorting the natural forms of, if you will, fragmentizing, creating fissures in what seems to be fixed so that the power of the sun can come through. Reminds me of the song, lyric by Leonard Cohen. The cracks are where the light comes through. So this is, in a sense, what Nadav and Abihu, as I read it this year, are doing. That they were witnessing a precisely described ritual, which was presumably to last for all time. And yet Nadav and Abihu create a fracture in that permanence and in that fixedness. And so Torah seems to be telling us, even in this book that seems to be so devoid of movement and motion and change, there's this bit of a crack within that Levitical structure that Torah is saying, but there's also this, there's also shattering, there's also this notion in which the form itself is but transient. And as I was reading it this year, I thought maybe that's in fact why Aaron was silent, not just because he was grieving for whatever happened to his son, but because here he was, the high priest, who's supposed to be in charge of this eternal and fixed ritual. And perhaps his sons have helped him to see that there's more than what we're doing right now. There's more than this form right now. And that's, in a sense, what happens at the Seder table during Passover. The children disrupt the formulaic presentation by the elder at the beginning of the service by all of a sudden asking all these questions. And the children, in a sense, redeem the true sense of movement that the Exodus is supposed to represent by restoring movement through the asking of questions and undoing the sense of certainty and certitude that sometimes elders like to bring to the table. So I also want to acknowledge that April is National Poetry Month. And I'd like to conclude by sharing with you a poem by a man who died on the very Shabbat in 1997 when the Jewish world was reading this story about Nadav and Abihu. And that's Allen Ginsberg. Because Allen Ginsberg was another one who was ready to pierce what seemed to be the fixedness and rigidity and eternality of life as we knew it. And he was willing to explore other dimensions and introduce new forms of how to express that in his poetry. So this is from a poem, This is About Death by Allen Ginsberg. Art recalls the memory of his true existence to whoever has forgotten that being is the one thing all the universe shouts. Only return of thought to its source will complete thought. Only return of activity to its source will complete activity. Listen to that. Allen Ginsberg is reminding us that whatever we're seeing in the moment is but a form that is giving momentary shape to something that cannot be contained. The source of all life, what he calls the being of all existence. And he points out that he doesn't use the word God. He uses a verb, activity, being. And he says, that's what's going on in the universe. So I entitled this week's study sheet, Genesis Eternal, after Paul Clay's commentary on modern art, the recognition that the artist is to be in touch with the notion that everything that we currently see is in transition, including me and including you. But with that, I'd love to know what you experienced. Justin, please go ahead. Justin and Linda, yeah.
It's just me, Rabbi. I was wondering, could you please repeat what you said? Did you say language is redeemed by asking questions? What did you say was? You just said it a moment ago.
Yeah. So,
if you remember.
Yeah. So at the Seder table, we have this thing called the Haggadah. and we have an order of things that are supposed to happen. And if it were just left up to some of us elders, we would just kind of run through it and get onto the meal and everything, as if it were not something that was happening in the moment. We're telling there's a tendency sometimes to read the Passover story as an event that happened some couple to 3,000 years ago. And the children disrupt that by saying, wait a minute, what about this? Why this? What does it mean? And by the way, what does it all mean to you, Dad? And and so that's a way that children in their innocence, who are not historians, they're not researchers, they're curiosity seekers, they're playful. And so what they're doing is they are redeeming the lesson of Passover from being a mere historical reflection to being something that's happening in the moment. This story about the Passover Seder is happening now, Dad, right at the table, Mom. And we can be on that journey right now. That's why I'm asking this questions. Okay. And so that's what I mean by it redeems it from being an artifact to being a current dynamic reality. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Catherine, then Dave. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. I was thinking too about Aaron's silence, and definitely it is more than grief, and I agree with that profoundly, because he has just performed all of these rituals, and yet Adonai takes his sons from him. And so it does, I think, prompt him to think about the meaning of what he is doing in a very different way. And also because he's not able to proceed with these rituals just like that. He has to stop and reflect.
I like that. Reflect. Go. You want to say some more? Yeah.
So I think it's the combination of terrible tragedy, but also being awestruck.
I like that. Awestruck. I
Yeah.
like that. So what you got me to think about, Catherine, is this notion that especially adults, when there's something either anomalous or tragic that happens, we try to rush in by offering an explanation. And I was thinking about Job and all of these so-called friends of Job that try to explain to him why all these bad things are happening to him. And the divine voice eventually says, "You're a bunch of idiots. You don't know me at all." And 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 so the lesson that you're pointing at and that I thought about in terms of Job and Aaron is perhaps the wisdom of not trying to come up with an explanation. So sometimes, we mean well when someone is grieving and we try and offer up, we sit down next to them and we start talking to them and trying to console them and and the Jewish wisdom is you just don't say anything. The Jewish wisdom is someone who's mourning, you don't try and make them feel better. You just sit there with them in their fragmented state. And so I appreciate what you're saying about kind of that moment of Aaron is just like he's demonstrating his wisdom by not saying anything. And it's not just that he's in mourning, it's he's in wisdom, perhaps. So thank you for that. Dave.
Uh, I have two things here. First, on the painting, I see four letters in the margins.
Yeah.
There's an R and a U on the bottom, and an L and a V on the top. And I have no idea what that could be. It doesn't seem to fit in. The second thing, I wanted to make a comment on Aaron after this incident with the fire pan, and said, and Aaron was silent. And that kind of reminded me of a sermon I heard after October 7th by Angela Buchdahl of Central Synagogue. And the topic of her sermon was simply, there are no words.
Yeah.
That's all I think.
So I was trying to find the source of the poet who said there's no point in writing after the Holocaust. I'm not sure if that was Primo Levi or someone else, but the notion that of words as an attempt to create meaning in a in a to describe something that has no meaning. And I'm glad that you pointed out, Dave, about the letters, because I don't know what those particular letters mean, but for me, what they represent the foundational aspects of words, which is the human currency when we are trying to explain things. And so maybe it is Clay's way of emphasizing the fish is in a meditative state where even words themselves have been pushed to the edge because words themselves sometimes are used to fill the emptiness which sometimes we should allow to exist rather than trying to fill it up. Richard here.
I was taught to never approach a person in the hour of their grief.
Right.
Because then they're left with the chore of dealing with your anxiety, and they don't get a chance to juggle the ambiguity of what's going on. It's only when we accept ambiguity and let the light shine through it that we can deal with the grief and love that are swelling through the body at the same time. And there's nothing to do to say anything to distract someone from dealing with that. And that's why you just kind of nod and sit by them.
Yeah, to be with them in their ambiguity.
Right. So they don't have to
Resolve.
deal with our anxiety
Yes.
about needing to say something.
Right. We think we're comforting someone and then they feel the responsibility to comfort you because so let me go back to Linda and Justin.
Right, Rabbi. I just wanted to mention it's Theodor Adorno who said
Ah,
that to write poetry after Auschwitz is barbaric.
thank you.
That was his phrase. But he later took it back. He later
Yeah.
said that because of all the suffering in the world, we must make art and poetry.
Yeah. And that's beautiful. So in that moment, he wanted to perhaps he just wanted to create that space that people were just rushing in to try and understand. And then at some point, you do need to bring in the poetry and the words. And while we're talking, I'm discussing this, we're looking at these words here, and I'm just reminded that there there's a tendency to try and find the inherent meaning in written words. And the Jewish way of reading words is to understand there's no inherent meaning in the words. And in a sense, that's what I think Paul Clay is also saying about the forms, the visual forms, that you need to look past the forms themselves in order to access what's really going on, that primal energy in the universe. And so the Jewish way of reading a text is to recognize that there's no fixed inherent meaning in these words, that it is about the relationship. What we need to pay attention to is the relationship that we have as we're reading the words and what they evoke for us. And they will be different for each one of us. And that's the glory of being part of an interpretive tradition rather than a prescribed meaning tradition. So let me kind of bring this moment to a point of conclusion which is this is a text which doesn't make it easy on us to find the meaning, because it is a text that provokes us to search not only within the words, but within ourselves in relationship to those words, what we find there. And the fact that we have this voice within this Levitical text in particular that seeks to that kind of blows apart this moment of a fixed prescribed ritual with this act that so many within the tradition have expressed as a sense of impulse and love, brings me back to the Haftarah portion and why I think it's really relevant. These three characters, David, Uzzah, and Obed-Edom, represent different approaches to the ark. David represents this exuberant, abandoned sense of passion and impulse, regardless of what others may think about him and how he's behaving. And that seems to be one part of the experience of bringing the ark into our lives. Then the other is that of Obed-Edom, who displays this act of discipline, respect, care for the ark. And then we have Uzzah. And the Uzzah represents, if you will, the mystery of it all. He was just trying to help the ark from falling, and he's struck down. So all of these seem to have a relevance and a place in the life of bringing the ark into our lives. Passion, discipline, and mystery. And perhaps each one of us will, at any point in our lives, display one of these traits more than another. And that's why it's important that we have community. And while we encourage and allow us, and in fact, encourage each one of us to manifest our own response to this material, rather than trying to shape it into only one acceptable kind of response. So I thank all of you for being part of a community of study and that permits each one of us to have our unique responses and not insisting that there just is one correct response. And that's how we create both the sacred community, and that's how I think we create, in Paul Clay's term, Genesis eternal. God bless you all. I look forward to our next gathering. Be well, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, everyone.
God bless.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Be well.
Be well.